Okay, so Section 7 tackles how a bill becomes a law. This is bare bones. Remember, this first article of the Constitution goes over how Congress works, but not at great detail or with a whole lot of specificity, because as we saw from the previous sections of the article, that the House and the Senate will each make their own rules for how they conduct themselves, or for how their procedures work. So pause and read this, and then I'm going to go over it. Okay, so a bill can start in either chamber, the House or the Senate. It really doesn't matter. A senator can introduce a bill, and so can a representative. The only time it matters, or the only exception to that rule, is a bill that's going to raise revenue, essentially a bill that's going to tax the citizens. And so the very first clause here says all bills for raising revenue have to originate in the House of Representatives. I don't want that to feel like something you're just memorizing. There's a logic to that. Revenue bills are going to tax us. And the framers would want the chamber that is most representative to be more responsible for taxation. Think about our mantra from the Revolutionary War, no taxation without representation. So it stands to reason that with this new government, we would have the more representative chamber have more authority in revenue bills. Nevertheless, that revenue bill that is introduced in the House still has to go through the Senate and still be blocked by the Senate. Okay, so the next clause, very long paragraph here about after it goes through the House and the Senate, if it actually gets passed by both chambers, and it is very difficult to make it through both chambers. Later on, we'll look at exactly what things happen these days in the House and the Senate to make it difficult to get through. But if it passes the House and the Senate, in either order, unless it's a revenue bill, in which it must start in the House, if it passes both chambers, it goes to the President. If he likes it, if he approves, he can sign it, and now it is law. If, when he gets that bill that's passed both chambers, he doesn't like it, he can veto it. Now, the word veto doesn't show up here, but rather that he can send it back to Congress with a list of his objections. So he's essentially sending it back to Congress, specifically to the chamber where the bill started. So if it started in the Senate, he'll send it back there. If it started in the House, he'll send it there. But he sends it with an explanation of what he didn't like about it. That gives Congress some time to work on it, and it demonstrates how the two branches don't have to be always working against each other, that they can work together in lawmaking, and that he definitely has a check on the legislative branch here. So he sends it back, that's the veto, into the House that it started. And they can, make adjustments. Maybe they'll read his objections, change it, send it back, so it's doable. But if they don't want to change it, and they still want it to become a law, they can override his veto. It will require a 2/3 vote. We want to make sure we see that it is 2/3 from both chambers. So currently there's 535 members in Congress. It wouldn't be 2/3 of that. It would be 2/3 of the 100 senators in the Senate, and then 2/3 of the 435 representatives. If both chambers can actually do that, then his veto has been overridden and it becomes a law. So he can sign it, it's a law. He can veto it, it's not a law. His veto could be overridden and it is a law. The rest of the paragraph goes into something a bit confusing, and that has to do with what if the president does nothing? I mean, imagine a president gets a bill and he doesn't like it, so he doesn't want it to become a law, but he also doesn't necessarily want to veto it and send it back for the option for that veto to be overridden. Well, if he does nothing with it, there is a clock. There's a 10-day clock, and that's reasonable. Congress has worked very hard on passing this bill, and he can't just sit on it as a way to block the legislation. So if, after receiving it, 10 days pass, excluding Sundays, 10 days pass, and Congress is waiting there to see what he'll do, to make sure he signs it, or to receive his list of objections, he does nothing, then it becomes a law. So it can become a law even if he doesn't sign it. And he might want to do that just so he doesn't put his name on a bill that he disagrees with. Maybe he wants to show his political party or some constituency that he opposed the bill even though it became a law. Or it might be more symbolic. Maybe he wants to be on what he thinks is the right side of history and not sign his name to this legislation. There's one other scenario. Let's suppose he gets the bill. He's a busy guy. He does have the 10 days. And when he does look at it, he goes, I don't like how this looks. You know, maybe it's day 8. He says, I want to change this, I want to change that. He's coming up with a list of objections. Meanwhile, Congress adjourned. There's nobody at the Capitol to receive his objections. So why bother making the list? Well, anyways, if he doesn't sign the bill in that 10-day period and Congress left, they adjourned, then essentially it is not a law, but rather this would be a pocket veto. So if he ignores the bill and Congress is adjourned, it essentially does not. It's not a law. It's a pocket veto. Okay, so you got the veto. To override the veto, you need 2/3 vote. And down here is the pocket veto. Okay. So Section 7, all about how a bill becomes a law. We're going to see a lot more details down the road, particularly with regards to the committee system in both chambers. Okay, Article 1, Section 8. Goodness, we've spent a lot of time here, so I didn't actually put all 18 clauses of the enumerated powers because I expect that you can now insert prior learning, that you've learned about the express and implied powers, that this is a list of powers to give Congress, under this new Constitution, more powers than the Congress had under the Articles of Confederation. So, if this is a list of Congress's power, remember this is a very logical document, the layout has reason to it. This is a list of what Congress can do. What follows is the denied powers, things Congress can't do. So, read through it, and then I'll tell you what to underline. Okay. First clause is the 1808 clause. That has to do with Congress not being allowed to ban the importation of slaves until 1808. There was no amendment needed to nullify this because it had its own expiration date. The next 2 clauses we talked about prior. These are powers denied to Congress. And often when we deny or limit powers to the government, that is in order to protect your civil rights or civil liberties. So in these 2 clauses, you see 3 individual rights guaranteed by limiting Congress. The writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended. That means that you have a right to be brought before a judge and told of why you're being imprisoned if you are. So Congress can't just imprison you without telling you why. And then no bill of attainder or ex post facto law shall be passed. This is to protect you from a Congress that use its lawmaking powers in a way that would be detrimental, arbitrary, or just unfair to you. So a bill of attainder would be a bill that automatically imprisons you and bypasses the court system. So no Congress cannot pass a bill like that. And an ex post facto law would be a law that Congress makes with the intention of applying it retroactively on people. So those are 2 individual liberties, so important that they're not left in the Bill of Rights at the end of the document, added later. They're in the very first article of the Constitution. No tax shall be laid on exports from states. So that's important to understand our free market economy and how the government would continue to protect that free market economy. And then let's underline no title of nobility. This would be a country without an aristocracy, one in which this would be the land of dreams, the land of opportunity, a place that provided the opportunity to have real upward mobility. Okay, Section 10, these are also denied powers, so you might want to title it denied powers, but these ones are specifically denied to the states. So the ones I'd underline is you can't enter into a treaty, can't coin money, lay taxes on imports or exports, and engage in war. Let's underline those. Okay, so that's Article 1 in its entirety.